Beloved, how are you? And welcome to Readings with Regina. Well, this is a very special day. It is the birthday of Huey P. Newton, and I'm going to talk more about my beloved co founder of the Black Panther Party for Self Defense, and I'm going to talk about him through two more brothers that he helped to create because he is the co founder, Huey, of the Black Panther Party for Self Defense. Hello, people. This is Huey's birthday. He would be 84 years old. Imagine that if the brother hadn't been assassinated. Yes. Celebrate your heroes, Black people. Now, I got a lot to discuss with you today, so I want to get right into it. I'm going to start with, of course, The Slave Ship, all right, by Marcus Rediker. Very good book. Okay, now, and look at the banner. Black people, celebrate your heroes. Black people, celebrate your heroes. Black people, celebrate your heroes. Now, yesterday, I got to get to the book. I got so much to say. But anyway, I got to say this. Yesterday, America celebrated George Washington's birthday, or was it? Yeah, yesterday. Boom. That's cool. I understand white America celebrating George Washington. Can you dig it? But George Washington owned slaves. So what are we talking here? The first 12 presidents of the United States owned slaves. So is that really our holiday? But I'll get back to that a little later in the show. This is the slave ship, and this chapter is called The Greedy Robbers. Sharks began to follow slave ships when they reached the Guinea coast. From Senegambia along the Windward, Gold, and Slave coasts to Congo and Angola, sailors spotted them when their vessels were anchored or moving slowly and most clearly in a dead calm. What attracted the sharks, as well as other fish, was the human waste, offal, and rubbish that was continually thrown overboard. Like a quote, greedy robber, the shark attends the ships in expectation of what may drop overboard. End of quote. A man who unfortunately falls into the sea at such a time is sure to perish without mercy. Young Samuel Robinson recalled the chill of the voracious predator. Quote, the very sight of him slowly moving round the ship with his black fin 2 feet above the water, his broad snout and small eyes, and the altogether villainous look of the fellow made one shiver, even when at a safe distance. End of quote. Sharks were especially dangerous when trade was carried on in boats and canoes in high surf between the slavers anchored offshore and the trading forts or villages on land. They swarmed around the smaller craft, occasionally lunging out of the water to bite an oar in half, hoping all the while, as one nervous trader noted, quote, to see the bottom of our canoe turned upwards, end of quote. Sharks were known as the dread of sailors. Sharks became an even greater dread as members of the crew began to die. Captains sometimes made efforts to bury deceased sailors ashore, as for example in Bonny, where corpses were interred in shallow graves on a sandy point about a quarter mile from the main trading town. But when the tidal river rose, the current sometimes washed the sand away from the bodies, causing a noxious stench and inviting hungry sharks. On most stretches of the coast, slavers had no burial rights, which resulted in what Silas Todd saw happen to the cadaver of a former comrade in the harbor of Sao Tome around 1735. Quote, The first shark seized one of its hindquarters and wrenched it off at the first shake. A second attacked the hindquarter and took that away likewise, when a third furiously attacked the remainder of the body and greedily devoured the whole thereof. End of quote. Crews tried to outsmart the sharks by sewing a dead sailor into his hammock or an old canvas sail and enclosing a cannonball to pull the body to the bottom, hopefully uneaten. This strategy often failed, as a sea surgeon noted, quote, I have seen sharks frequently seize a corpse as soon as it was committed to the sea, tearing and devouring that and the hammock that shrouded it without suffering it once to sink, though a great weight of ballast was in it. End of quote. If the shark was the dread of sailors, it was the outright terror of the enslaved. No effort was made to protect or bury the bodies of African captives who died on the slave ships. One commentator after another reiterated what Alexander Falconbridge said of Bonny, where sharks swarmed, quote, in almost incredible numbers about the slave ships, devouring with great dispatch the dead bodies of the Negroes, small n, as they are thrown overboard, end of quote. The Dutch merchant Wilhelm Bozeman described a feeding frenzy in which 4 or 5 sharks consumed a body without leaving a trace. Late arriving sharks would attack the others with blows so furious as to, quote, make the sea around to tremble, end of quote. The destruction of corpses by sharks was a public spectacle and part of the degradation of enslavement. This, my friends, is what many of our ancestors being transported to the so-called New World through the transatlantic slave trade went through. Because if you remember from previous readings, there were enslaved people who committed suicide, or they were punished by throwing 1 or 2 enslaved Africans overboard. This is what those white racist pig dog slave captains did to our ancestors. All right, next book I'm going to read, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. You know that she's being terrorized by a man that could have been her grandfather. She's only 19 years old, and this enslaver slaps her around, beats her kids. Here we go. And what I like about Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, as I've mentioned many, many times, is that it's a true story. It is true. Linda Brent / Harriet Tubman. Harriet Brent, Linda Brent and Harriet Jacobs, I'm sorry. Harriet Jacobs was her real name, but in the book, she's Linda Brent, okay? So here we go. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. In one of his visits, she's talking about that enslaver. He happened to find a young girl whom he had sold to a trader a few days previous. His statement was that he sold her because she had been too familiar with the overseer. She had had a bitter life with him and was glad to be sold. She had no mother and no near ties. She had been torn from all her family years before. A few friends had entered into bonds for her safety. If the trader would allow her to spend with them the time that intervened between her sale and the gathering up of his human stock, such a favor was rarely granted. It saved the trader the expense of board and jail fees and Though the amount was small, it was weighty consideration in a slave trader's mind. Understand this. Before the enslaved people were put up on an auction block, they were either put in a jail or they were put in a slave pen. This girl is staying at Linda Brent's grandmother's house with her. Dr. Flint, that's the enslaver, always had an aversion to meeting slaves after he had sold them. He ordered Rose out of the house, but he was no longer her master, and she took no notice of him. For once, the crushed Rose was the conqueror. His gray eyes flashed angrily at her, but that was the extent of his power. Quote, "How came this girl here?" End of quote. He exclaimed, quote, "What right had you to allow it when you knew I had sold her?" End of quote. I answered, "This is my grandmother's house, and Rose came to see her. I have no right to turn anybody out of doors. That comes here for honest purposes." He gave me the blow that would have fallen upon Rose if she had still been his slave. Woman beater. My grandmother's attention had been attracted by loud voices, and she entered in time to see a second blow dealt. She was not a woman to let such an outrage in her own house go unrebuked. The doctor undertook to explain that I had been insolent. Her indignant feelings rose higher and higher and finally boiled over in words. "Get out of my house," she exclaimed. "Go home and take care of your wife and children, and you will have enough to do without watching my family." He threw the birth of my children in her face and accused her of sanctioning the life I was leading. Remember, sisters in particular, I told you, staying a virgin meant a lot to Black people. If they could, especially Black women. You were not to have children until you were married. Isn't that something? I want you all to think about that. Okay. He threw the birth. Yeah, okay, here. She told him I was living with her by compulsion of his wife and that he needed not accuse her, for he was the one to blame. He was the one who had caused all the trouble. She grew more and more excited as she went on. "I tell you what, Dr. Flint," said she, "you ain't got many more years to live, and you'd better be saying your prayers. It will take 'em all and more to wash the dirt off your soul." Right on, sis. "Do you know whom you are talking to?" he exclaimed. She replied, "Yes, I know very well who I'm talking to." He left the house in a great rage. I looked at my grandmother. Our eyes met. Their angry expression had passed away, but she looked sorrowful and weary of incessant strife. I wondered that it did not lessen her love for me, but if it did, she never showed it. She was always kind, always ready to sympathize with my troubles. There might have been peace and contentment in that humble home if it had not been for the demon slavery. She called slavery a demon. I concur with that. Okay, now we're going to go to, oh Lord, I love this woman. Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells. All right. Any of you new people, if you don't know Ida B., look her up. Okay. Fantastic sister. Now, let me see, where am I? Ida. Let me even mention their names again. Ida's friends were, all right, I was about to say a dirty word, I won't. Ida B. Wells' friends were lynched. They were shot dead by rotten, low-life white men jealous of them because they were businessmen running a grocery store. Now, This is right after slavery. This is in the 1890s, I believe. White grocer got jealous, got his friends together, and killed these men. But let me just say these brothers shot back. Yes, they did. And they were put in jail with hundreds of other black men that white men just put in jail just because. Well, anyway, what they did, the white dudes, they took them out of jail, okay, put them on a train, took them to another part of town, and shot them. And with one, they gorged out his eyes. This is what white men did to black men. And I'm going to tell you these people's names too, because you ought to know them. These are the brothers who were murdered for defending themselves. Self-defense. Thomas Moss, Calvin McDowell, and Henry Stewart. All right. Well, the black people have found out that they have been killed so viciously. And this is where Ida picks up. The shock of the colored people who knew and loved both Moss and McDowell was beyond description. Groups of them went to the grocery and elsewhere and vented their feelings in talking among themselves, but they offered no violence. Word was brought to the city hall that Negroes were massing at the curb where the grocery had been located. Immediately, an order was issued by the judge of the criminal court sitting on the bench, who told the sheriff to, quote, take 100 men, go out to the curb at once, and shoot down any Negro on sight who appears to be making trouble. Shoot down any Negro on sight who seems to be creating trouble. The loafers around the courts quickly spread the news, and gangs of them rushed into the hardware stores, armed themselves, boarded the cars, and rushed out to the curb. They obeyed the judge's orders literally and shot into any group of Negroes they saw with a little compunction, as if they had been on a hunting trip. The only reason hundreds of Negroes were not killed on that day by the mobs was because of the forbearance of the colored men. They realized their helplessness and submitted to outrages and insults for the sake of those depending upon them. People, look at the position the black men were in. Definitely they wanted to fight back. I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. But they thought about their wives, their children, depending on them. This is the kind of traumatic turmoil that white people, white enslavers, white savages placed on 19th century free black men who went into business for themselves, were smart enough to do that. The whites get jealous and they want to remove the blacks. I'm back to the book now. This mob took possession of the People's Grocery Company. That was the name of the store that the brothers owned. Helping themselves to food and drink. Look what they did, the bastards. And destroyed what they could not eat or steal. The creditors had the place closed, and a few days later, what remained of the stock was sold at auction. Thus, with the aid of the city and county authorities and the daily papers, that white grocer had indeed put an end to his rival Negro grocer as well as his business. Now, Ida writes for the Free Speech. This is what she wrote. The city of Memphis has demonstrated that neither character nor standing avails the Negro. If he dares to protect himself against the white man or become his rival, there is nothing we can do about the lynching now, as we are outnumbered and without arms. The white mob could help itself to ammunition without pay, but the order was rigidly enforced against the selling of guns to Negroes. Check that, people. There is therefore only one thing left that we can do: save our money and leave a town which will neither protect our lives and property nor give us a fair trial in the courts, but takes us out and murders us in cold blood when accused by white persons. I'm not going to comment because I got a lot to say, okay? But I ain't lying. That is terrible. Okay, I'm going to go to my next book. I'm trying to find where it is. It should be. Here it is. Assata, 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 Assata. Okay, let me change this banner too, because I want y'all to know this. Let me see. There it is. All right, I want y'all to be thinking about that. Okay. Let me go back and remove Assata. All right. Assata Shakur, she's still a little kid. And this is what she wanted to share about her childhood. Outside of school was a whole nother matter. When I wasn't doing homework or chores, I would go exploring. My bicycle was one of the great loves of my life. I would jump on it and ride all over Queens. Sometimes on Saturdays or Sundays, I would ride all day long, leaving early in the morning and returning as late as I was allowed to. And if I wasn't on my bicycle, I was somewhere playing with my friends. Yes. We played everything from house to handball. I played with the boys more than the girls because the boys had better games. I loved punch ball and handball, anything that involved running. The playground was right across the street from my house, and I took full advantage of everything that was there. I played hopscotch. I did too. Marbles. I did too. And cowboys and Indians. I always wanted to be an Indian and would hide over or under something and leap out shrieking at the top of my lungs. I guess I was unusual in that respect because most of the kids wanted to be cowboys. I was always rough and clumsy, and I played everything as if my life depended on it. Some of the girls didn't like to play with me because they said I was too rough, and I was always excluded from the rope jumping sessions. I was too clumsy to jump double dutch. Wow. And they didn't even like me to turn because they said I was uneven handed. Wow. But I always had one best friend, and she was always a girl. I had other friends to play with and hang out with, but I always had one special friend that I could really talk to. We would go to the candy store and the movies and places like that, and we would sit and talk for hours about just anything. By the time I reached the sixth grade, I began to idolize and imitate the big kids. Parents, I really want you to think about this. I'm going to speak more on this. I'm going to read this again. By the time I reached the sixth grade, I began to idolize and imitate the big kids who went to junior high. Do you see this? This is an area where you mothers and fathers must take hold of your children and give them the kind of lessons and exercises that you want them to carry, because those younger, Assata is telling us, look up to the next level of young kids. All right. I couldn't wait to grow up. The grown-up world was so exciting. Wow. And when you were grown up, you could do anything you wanted to. Besides, I was beginning to feel different. I was beginning to be interested in boys. I'm going to share with you her poems called Crackerjacks. I could have told you in the old days in the park or skating down some hill what it was all about. I could have sat next to you on some stairway and gave you half my bubble gum. And in between the bubbles and the giggles, I could have told you, but we are grown up now. And it is all so complicated when you dig somebody. Now, when I open up my Cracker Jacks, I find no heart-shaped ring, only a puzzle that I don't want to solve. That's our girl, Assata. Assata Shakur, baby. All right. Now, I want to go here. Let me bring this up. Check this out. First of all, it is Huey P. Newton's birthday. Yes. And I want to tell you about Huey P. Newton through these two brothers that he helped to create. The one on the right is John Huggins. The one on the left is, that's John Huggins. And that is, apprentice Bunchy Carter. How I love that brother. Like I said in the thumbnail, these are two of the baddest Los Angeles Panther leaders ever. And they were assassinated by CIA, FBI, and planted within the rival Black organization called US. These tremendous brothers were killed in 1969. Now, Bunchy Carter, on the left, he was born October the 12th, 1942. He's a Libra. He was the Deputy Minister of Defense of the Los Angeles branch of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. John Huggins was born February the 11th, 1945. He's an Aquarian. He would have been 81 had he lived. He was a Deputy Minister of Information of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense in LA. What I loved about knowing these brothers, well, I didn't really know John, but I was in love with Bunchy Carter because Bunchy Carter was the coolest poet. He was beautiful. He was smart. He taught his gangbangers how to read. Lord have mercy. He brought many of them brothers into the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. That's Bunchy right here. Okay. He's no longer on earth, but I want you, my listeners, to know your heroes and celebrate them. I'm going to talk more about Bunchy when I meet with you again on Thursday. But today is Huey P. Newton's birthday. Celebrate him. Light a candle for him. Tell your children about him. Now, let me just show you this. I know. That's how some of you all know Huey, and that is Huey. Bless his heart. Look what this artist did. Look at this rendition of Huey P. But check this out. This is also Huey P. Newton. People, do you understand that when Huey Newton was assassinated, he was Dr. Huey P. Newton? Hello. Look at that Huey P. Newton. Look at the scholar. And I also want to remind you all, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton met in college. They were college boys together. They had went and seen Malcolm together. They loved Malcolm, and they knew a new kind of organization needed to take place. And Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton created the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Hello. Huey P. Newton was the Minister of Defense. Bobby Seale was the chairman. Now, let me show you this again. Now, these two brothers, Bunchy was the Deputy Minister of Defense. John Huggins was the Deputy Minister of Information. Hello. And I'm going to tell you right now, they died, or I should say, they were assassinated, making sure that there were Black studies in colleges, and universities. Yes, yes, yes. That's what they died for. I want you to know your heroes, Black people. Know your heroes and celebrate them. John Huggins said, educate to liberate. Educate to liberate. Educate to liberate. And I've also seen and heard Mumia says that. Educate to liberate. Bunchy and John were at a meeting for Black Studies. And these jealous, deranged brothers who wanted to control Black Studies, they were told they should control it, killed these beautiful, 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 beautiful brothers. I love Bunchy from afar. And I'm going to talk more about him on Thursday, because I'm going to read a poem that he wrote that just blew my mind. Now, my people, I also want to share this with you. I'm reading books from the enslavement period, then the period after enslavement, that's Ida B. Wells, and of course the contemporary Assata Shakur, who we just lost last year. I also, though, want to share something with you that I think is very important. The President of the United States right now is trying to erase our history. I know you know this, but I just want to really clarify this point. I'm in Philly, you dig? And in Philly, in Center City, we had an exhibit called The President's House, George Washington's house. Boom, when he was here in Philly. Well, when he was here in Philly, because George Washington was here in Philly. In fact, the first White House, you might say, was here in Philly. Well, George Washington owned slaves. I said that. But it's just not me talking. Everybody know that, scholar. He owned slaves. All right, fine. So the exhibit shows that. Well, the President of the United States decided that should be taken down. And it was taken down. The exhibit of George Washington. See, because, the President of the United States, he wants to erase history. He wants to pretend that white people did everything, that there was no free labor for 300 or more years. You dig? But guess what? We had brave Black people, probably some white people too. Legalese. They got that overturned. They overturned the President of the United States orders. So the exhibit is going back up. Hello. When you fight, you win. Now, I'm getting ready to close, but I want to say this to you too, because this also involves the man in the White House right now. In Africa, see, I'm a Black nationalist. I mean, I love Black people here in America. I'm one of y'all, but we come from Africa. So I want you to be educated about Africa as well. Dig. And right now, we got 3 African leaders that are beautiful. They are independent. They're independent from France. They're independent from Britain. They right on brothers. They are from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And they call themselves the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. Mali is Assimi Goita. Burkina Faso, he's a heartthrob. Ibrahim Traore, Niger, Abdul Rahman Chiani. Look these people up. The President of the United States just sent, I think it was 200, maybe 3, but 200 soldiers into Nigeria, which is on the border of these countries. Now, what's that about? See, because these countries have moved away from white power. They're thinking more about their people. They want their resources to go to Black people in Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, not America. You saw what the president of the United States did to the Venezuelan president. Well, he think he gonna try to pull something like that in Africa. So be aware of that, my people. Okay? The last thing I want to say to you is this. I want you to check out, he's a dude from Africa. His name is David Hundeyin. David Hundeyin, Hundeyin. Okay, because he could tell you the story much better than I can. I want my people, I want you all to look at African news and certainly news that has to do with African American people. All right, my loves. It is always a pleasure to be with you. Let me remind you again, this is Huey Newton's birthday. Huey Newton's birthday. And like I say in this banner, let's create a new culture that relates to us. Let's always identify our heroes. Huey Newton was willing to die for you. Understand that. Panthers were willing to die for you. That's how much we loved you. We often loved you more than we loved ourselves. All right, brothers and sisters, I'm truly going to sign off now. It has been a pleasure. I'm going to show you this one more time. Isn't that a lovely thumbnail? I love that. Anyway, I'll be back on Thursday, 2 o'clock, and we're going to talk more about Panthers, Huey, and the books that you know I'm scheduled to read. All right, do something good for yourself. Do something good for your people. Celebrate Huey's 84th birthday, and I will see you on Thursday. Oh, yeah, one more thing I want to say. Like these videos. It means something. I'm not sure what, but I've been told to tell you that. Like them, and of course, spread them.